Good afternoon. This is a special meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Water and Power Commissioners. Barbara, can you please call the roll?
We have Commissioners Parfrey, Moss, and Noonan present.
Thank you. Just to inform you that this meeting is being recorded for broadcast on Channel 35. The exact broadcast times can be found by contacting Channel 35. Barbara, can you call the first agenda item, please?
Item number 1, consideration of agreement regarding settlement terms.
Thank you. And at this point, are we going into closed session? Is that your advice?
That is the plan.
And so...
So at this point, we will recess into closed session for this and the closed session items, and then we'll report any reportable action taken in closed session when we come back out, but we will be coming back out.
Thank you. All right, we will now go into closed session. Thank you.
Don't have too much fun while we're gone. Really?
You did?
Unanimous vote?
We're recording?
Congratulations.
I didn't see
feel
your
I
name in
did-
the paper.
Then you didn't read the paper?
Tom,
We're
I
recording.
feel I did win the College World Series.
Good, I was rooting for him.
We're recording?
Oh, okay.
We are
recording.
Fuck, yeah, I don't want that to be recorded. We're back in session. We're up to item 1. General Manager, would you please
Yes, thank
walk
you.
us through this?
Thank you, President Sales and other commissioners. The matter that's before you here today is a result of 3 months of settlement discussions that took place between, as part of a process that exists in the arrangements between Great Basin Air Pollution, Unified Air Pollution Control District and LA Department of Water and Power, and that provides for 2 commissioners, 2 members of our board, to meet with members of the Great Basin Board to work through trying to resolve disputes. And this came about under a dispute that pertains to a matter that's related to the stipulated order of abatement on what we call Phase 7A of our dust mitigation up there. You'll recall that we had started our final designs and plans for that Phase 7A, and encountered very significant cultural resources, Native American resources on that land. Those concerns were actually addressed before this board in a recent meeting when you approved the environmental impact report for that. I think you'll recall when we had the public comment here by a member of the tribe up there, Kathy Bancroft, and her very poignant comments with respect to that. Now, the department had some exposure to some pretty potential significant penalties for not meeting certain deadlines for that dust mitigation. And by virtue of encountering these cultural resources, we were certain not to meet those deadlines. And as a result, found ourselves in a predicament that we need to work our way through. We had expressed our belief to Great Basin that planned dust mitigation would indeed impact these significant resources, and therefore that's why we didn't move forward. We needed further consultation. We wanted more confirmation of those resources that were present, and develop a plan that would involve avoidance of that affected area. I'm not going to go into the back and forth that there was, and there was significant back and forth. There are a list of drafts this high that we went through. But ultimately, we went through a negotiation between the parties, and I think the result is quite favorable for both parties. So let me give you just an overview, because there are quite a few number of features. This is not 100% of it. The document is a bit more complete than this, but these are the items of, I believe, of the greatest substance. There's a certain area that's been identified within Phase 7A for further evaluation of those cultural resources while we move forward with the dust mitigation on the balance of Phase 7. That is not expected to have those significant cultural resources, and that area has been agreed to and set aside. There's been a cultural resource task force that will be established with outside parties as well as the state to review that as we go forward, so that there's an advisory panel that's an independent panel that will work forward, and that's a way to get through to identify and make certain we comply with the law that protects those resources, and we can come up with a plan that allows us to move forward. We'll properly consult with those parties and advise on that matter, and later determine if all or part of that part that we've set aside can be mitigated, part of it can be mitigated, or can't be mitigated whatsoever, in the manner in which that would be done, and whether some portion would remain untouched or not. All of that will be determined later, but there's a process that's set forth in doing that very clearly in the settlement terms. New dates for achieving the dust mitigation on those areas have been established, dates that we believe that we can work within. Great Basin, of course, believes that we can work within as well. There will be no penalty payments associated with us performing under those later dates, so that issue has been resolved. Other feature here that's an important one is Great Basin has approved the use of modified gravel, so a lesser depth of gravel for those areas where gravel is appropriate. It's not in all cases. And that will be a new best available control mechanism, or as we refer to it by the acronym BACM. They've also approved using brine shallow flooding, the use of highly saline water, as a mechanism for BACM going forward. They've also agreed to work with us on an accelerated testing for BACM for what we call roughness elements and tillage. You know, the tillage issue it's not resolved, but they will work forward on that on an accelerated basis. That would reduce both costs and water requirements if we do that going forward. I think you're aware that we've also established a time frame for new BACM measures, methods that we might come up with, that within a 12-month period they would get a final determination. So we've had a situation in the past where these issues have gone on and just never gotten resolution. We now have a period, more structured method, and a structured timeline within which we'll get a decision on new measures as we come up with them. I think you're aware that Great Basin has long expressed concern about dust emissions from the Keeler Dunes area that's on kind of the northeast part of the lake, above the 3,600-foot level. They would like to undertake some new mechanisms that they themselves would undertake. We have agreed, as part of the overall settlement, to make a $10 million, what we refer to as a public benefit payment to Great Basin, which they in turn can apply to that dust mitigation that they themselves will undertake on Keeler Dunes, and we will forever get a release of responsibility for dust emissions on the Keeler Dunes. They will also issue a permanent release from two other key dune areas called the Swansea and the Olancha Dunes, which at times have been emissive, on the east and the southeast part of the lake, respectively, and we get a release for those provisions of federal, state, and local laws pertaining to dust emissions that Great Basin has the authority to enforce and settle. Now, that latter portion with respect to those two other dune areas does not release us from dust emissions that could result from future ground pumping by DWP at or below the 3,600-foot level in the Owens Lake area. Great Basin has agreed to amend their state implementation plan, or the SIP as we refer to it, for a specific Great Basin board order and a specific Great Basin board order that would be relevant to these matters, and that SIP will reflect this agreement and the operative aspects of this agreement, and will request both the California Air Resources Board and the U.S. EPA to approve those amendments. Of course, the actions of that approval is up to CARB and U.S. EPA. There's other matters here as well in there. I think these are the key operative items on that. If there's anything that I've missed there, Julie or Jim, please take note of that and go ahead and bring that up. But I think there's another important element of this, and that is that this is, while it was not an easy process, it was a process of significant agreement between the parties on some very material matters. And I'm hopeful that this forms a basis for future resolution of the remaining. We certainly have other issues that are out there still. We have certain issues out there that we're still under litigation on, particularly as it pertains to those some of those areas below the 3,600-foot level. But I believe that this step forward in the process that was used creates a basis for us to address those in a more collaborative way going forward. And I'm certainly hopeful that will be the case. I would like to take this time to particularly note the efforts of Commissioners Moss and Parfrey on this. They took untold hours, trips back and forth up to Owens, meetings down here, meetings at night, meetings late at night, phone calls over poor connections on cell phones, going through incredible amounts of detail and getting into significant efforts on the exact wording on these matters, on one-on-one negotiations with the members of the Great Basin Board. They were supported incredibly well, I say, by the staff here and our managers, Jim McDaniel, Marty Adams, Bill Van Wagener, who, thankfully for him, is actually on vacation with his wife right now, overdue, did a great job on this. Our deputy city attorneys, Michelle Lyman and Julie Riley, just did excellent work on this, a lot of time and effort on that. It was an intensive team effort to get this done, and with this, I request the honorable board's approval of these settlement terms. I do want to make clear that these same settlement terms will be voted upon tomorrow by the Great Basin Board. You'll see there's a signature at the bottom of this, and then ultimately there will still be a final settlement agreement embodying these terms, so there's still another action to go after this. But you have before you that full set of settlement terms, and would ask for your approval.
Commissioner Parfrey?
Thank you, President Sales. Commissioner Richard Moss and I participated in these talks beginning over a couple months ago. And the source of these initial conversations came out of the 2011 SOA that provided for us to have this procedure where two commissioners from LADWP could meet with some Great Basin Board members to develop recommendations to resolve some of the problems in meeting some of the 7A compliance deadlines, and make those recommendations to our respective bodies. And so when we met in Independence over 2 months ago, there was clearly sort of a meeting of minds, and we were able to affect some agreements on 7A, but we also decided to see if we couldn't find a way of resolving some of the other more thorny issues facing the people in the Owens Valley. And we did find a counterparty. We found people that did want to meet with us, that did want to operate in good faith to come up with an agreement. And so there were times that we met in Mojave, California. That was halfway to Owens Valley, and we met with them halfway, both figuratively and literally. And I would say there was a minimum of 50 to 60 hours of negotiations that took place that Commissioner Moss and I were part of. And I want to really bring to everyone's attention that Commissioner Moss was really masterful in the meetings, in creating the draft terms of mastering a language that is not necessarily in dust control parlance. Is not really his specialty, but he mastered it. And
Bilingual.
he's not bilingual. And he facilitated the meetings. And I just to share with you, Richard would walk people through time and time again. He brought them back into the fold so they can continue the negotiation. And I have to also say that the staff did great work, and it was Marty Adams and Bill Van Wagener and Jim McDaniel and our general manager. Thank you very much, Mr. Nichols, for your efforts in this. And again, our city attorneys, Julie Riley and Michelle Lyman, really notable work. And again, it was our Great Basin board members, Larry Johnston, Matt Kingsley, and Linda Arcularius were really helpful in reaching a settlement. They put their shoulder to the wheel and they pushed. And they pushed their staff, and perhaps Richard and I pushed our staff, and we ended up with an agreement. This is not a comprehensive agreement. There is an opportunity going forward, we believe, for a comprehensive agreement. However, the clock has run out on this commission to be able to affect that. But we would invite the next commission to also try to engage the Great Basin board members and try to affect a more comprehensive agreement that could potentially avoid litigation in the future. So there is a new day, and there is a framework for moving forward. And with that in mind, Richard?
Commissioner Moss?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Parfrey. I echo your sentiments, and thank you for the kind words about my participation. You were definitely in the scrum at all times, late at night, and keeping us on track, and that was very valuable, and I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank General Manager Nichols. Had you not come on board right away and seen the benefits of pursuing these at first very exploratory and somewhat crazy conversations that we were having, we wouldn't have gone forward, and we really appreciate your willingness to take a chance, and I think it's borne a lot of fruit, and really opens up a new day in terms of our relations as a department with the Great Basin folk. And with that, I want to thank Linda and Matt and Larry for their willingness to think creatively, to put their policy hats on, to think about their constituents and how our discussions could result in concrete agreements that will directly benefit the constituents in Owens Valley, including many of our LADWP employees who reside up there. So with that, I would like to make a motion to approve the settlement.
Let's wait one.
Oh, okay.
Hold that
I'll
just
hold
one
that
second.
motion.
Commissioner Noonan, do you want to make a
Thank you. I feel that there's so many mutual benefits to this agreement between our department and Great Basin. Of particular joy to me is that a cultural resource task force has been created, because I truly have been left unsettled that we were not going to respect those artifacts and handle complying to our requirements in a timely manner, and having to bypass the sensitivity as it related to that historical site. So I'm very pleased that a reasonable compromise has been created, and I hope that this successful collaboration is the first upon many between our department and Great Basin. And again, I extend my appreciation to our commissioners and all of the people involved in reaching this agreement.
Would the ratepayer advocate like to be heard on this matter?
I'm just learning about it for the first time now. I think I don't have enough information to comment.
I want to join in with my fellow commissioners in just commending the entire group and team who worked on this matter. I have to tell you, when I first asked Commissioner Moss and Commissioner Parfrey to take on this challenge, I wasn't convinced that we could do it. But clearly, I think through their perseverance and the perseverance of the folks at Great Basin, we were able to come up with what is a really reasonable accommodation. I think we didn't fall into the trap of letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. This is a good settlement. It brings, while it is not completely comprehensive, it brings finality around certain issues, and it creates a pathwork and a framework for us going forward and having a much more cooperative relationship with Great Basin. So I am terribly supportive of this, and even more appreciative of the work that all of you have done. So at this point, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'd like to make that motion,
Is
please.
there a second?
There is. Second.
Let's have a roll call vote on this, Barbara.
Okay, Commissioner Moss?
Aye.
Commissioner Noonan?
Aye.
Commissioner Sales?
Aye.
Commissioner Parfrey?
Aye.
Motion carries, and thank you all. Is there anything else we need, Barbara?
No, that takes care of the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Meeting's adjourned.